Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Rabbi Tovia Singer's Let's Get Biblical Q&A. Coming to you from the Holy Land, Rabbi, the man, Tovia Singer. Welcome back. Rabbi, how are you today?
Doing fine. It's good to be back. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Been having a great week, and things are just, we had a really nice storm last night, which was, I really enjoy storms, as long as I'm not working in it or having to travel in it. Something about just heavy rains, just especially when we need it. It's been pretty dry here, for the most part anyway, so very nice.
Yeah. Here in Israel, it's people are, I think, like around the world, people are very concerned about this catastrophic tragedy that occurred in Meron on Lag BaOmer in the northern Galilee, near the tomb of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, where in a terrible stampede, 45 people were killed and hundreds wounded. And so that's been very much on the minds of people here in Israel. And yeah, so that's, I think it's the worst peacetime tragedy that's ever occurred in the Jewish state.
My goodness. Wow. That's so sad to hear. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see. So, hey, just another quick recap. Looking forward to seeing you coming to Houston, as well as other places in the States. If you guys don't live near Houston, just contact Rabbi Singer at outreachjudaism.org or Tovia Singer 1 at AOL.com, and he can, if you have any questions on where, you have postings on everywhere you're going to be, right, in all those in different states and things. Good.
Yeah. You know what's a really good idea is that you just subscribe to outreachjudaism.org. Go on contacts, because I'm going to send out a thing described. But I will be speaking in Houston on Saturday night. I think it's the 24th of July. Is that right? And then on Sunday, the 25th of July. It's if you do want to come, it's going to be there's not going to be room very shortly.
Sure.
So if you do want to come, you really want to register very, very soon. For the Saturday night thing, I don't even think there are many seats left. For the Sunday thing, there are some. But you want to do that very quickly. You should really follow me on Facebook. If you go to my page, even if you can't friend me because there's so many, you can follow me and then see the post that I just put up. But those are going to be sold out really quickly. They're not. It's not like we're having this in a stadium, or an auditorium which can hold thousands of people. It's a limited number, and you're welcome. I will be lecturing in Indiana, in Fort Wayne, on the very next day, on July 26th. And it'll be in the evening. I did not yet post the venue for that program, so stand by and we're going to let you know about that. And those of you who are in Israel, we're welcome to join me on Shavuos night, May 16th. I'll be lecturing in Jerusalem all night, starting at 11:30 p.m., so you're welcome to join me then.
And that's after
what's that?
That was after this whole U.S. trip?
No, that's before. That's actually May 16th. It's the night of Shavuos. Our tradition is that we stay up all night studying Torah.
Nice.
Because that festival marks many things, but including the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. And our tradition is to, in fact, stay up all night studying Torah. And my lecture is beginning at 11:30 p.m. at night. 11:30 p.m.
Nice.
So those who want to join, I'm going to be speaking and then literally doing Q&A with the audience all night. So You're welcome to join. That is going to be crazy.
Another question
have a wonderful time.
do you have an open-ended ticket here in the States? In other words, can you, if someone else wants to book you at another state, do you still have time to do that on the follow-up, or no?
I'm only in the United States for a short period of time.
Okay.
If somebody wants to book me to speak in the United States in the second half of July or very early August, you should really contact me as quickly as possible, because I'm about to lock down the tickets and it would be complicated to change the dates. So if you want to have me speak in your community, that means you want to host it, you really want to write to me very quickly at my email address, which is my name, Tovia Singer, the number 1 at AOL.com.
Right.
And you want to do that very, very quickly, because most of those days are already taken. There are some days that are available. I'm doing many other programs, but those are completely booked up already. So if you do want to bring me to your community in North America, you want to speak very quickly. It'll be much more complicated later for me to change my arrival or return flight to Israel.
Very good,
right.
Very good. Definitely looking forward to seeing you in Houston. Like I said, I'll be there this Saturday and this Sunday, so I'll be able to see you both times. So that'll be great.
Yeah, you're going to be there too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I think I'm going to be bringing some of my sound equipment as well to try to help kind of give you some extra boost. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You bet. All right, I guess we move on to this first caller. Very good. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hello, my name is Brandon. I have a quick question about the Messiah as far as Judaism goes. I was reading the New Testament, and Jesus said that he's the good shepherd, and he says that there's going to be other sheep that he must go get. And after that, there will be one flock and one shepherd. At the time Jesus was saying this, there was no New Testament around. So, when he was speaking about this, he was saying that he is the one shepherd in Ezekiel 37 and Ezekiel 34. With that being said, Ezekiel 34 and Ezekiel 37 says that Hashem will make the one shepherd King David, who is to be resurrected from the valley of dry bones, as well as all the other prophets who speak about the resurrection of King David as the Messiah in the end days, i.e. Hosea chapter 3. Have you ever heard of this, or is this a concept that is found within Kabbalistic Judaism of the reincarnation or resurrection of King David? And if so, why did Jesus claim that he was him? Thank you.
Interesting. Very good. All right, very good. Go ahead and hang up now and tune in for your answer. Rabbi, it's all yours.
Yeah, great question. Mm-hmm. So why does Jesus claim to be the good shepherd in John chapter 10? It's a very famous series of passages that I think begins at verse 11. The claim that Jesus is the good shepherd, or is the shepherd and is not the full shepherd, is not only found in John, but the idea, you'll find it in Matthew and Mark, and of course, very, very famously John. You'll find it in Hebrews, you find it in Revelation, you find it in 1 Peter. Why would this claim be made for Jesus? Well, the reason is very simple, and that is that we are told by God through the prophet Ezekiel that the Messiah is going to be the good shepherd, that God is going to tend over his flock. The false shepherds, the fake shepherds, those who are false leaders, they are going to be removed. The nations that preyed upon the Jewish people, they will no longer be able to harm the children of Israel. And that God is going to use his servant David. This is the end of Ezekiel 34. It's 34 verse, actually 24, 25, and so on. Kind of similar to Ezekiel 37, also 24 and 25. So the good shepherd is called David. A commentary must be said here, and that is, in Tanakh, the Messiah is called many things except for the Messiah. That's a post-biblical term. The In Tanakh, the Messiah is called the Prince, right here in Ezekiel 34, 37, Hosea 3, 4, and 5, particularly verse 5. It means he's called the Nasi. The whole end of Ezekiel is called the Prince. That'll come up nearly 20 times. So Tanakh is using different language than we are, but it means the Mashiach. That's what we're referring to. And he's called David. Now the reason, here's where we got to work this through. The reason why the Messiah is called David is because he is the fulfillment of the Davidic Covenant that God made with David HaMelech of blessed memory many times, famously in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12 through 16. The key is that Hashem promised King David that it will be through the son that will build this house, meaning the temple, in my name. Through him will come forth in a lineage that cannot be destroyed. Individual descendants may sin against me, and I will punish them personally, but I will never rip away the promise, the kingship from your descendants, as I did to your predecessor, in brackets, King Saul. So therefore, because the Mashiach, who is to come, is a descendant of King David, and more importantly, he is the ultimate fulfillment of the promise that Hashem made to King David. So therefore, he is called David frequently in Tanakh. That does not mean that the Messiah's name will be David. Now, it's possible. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean that he definitely won't be called David. Maybe his name will be David. We don't know. But the key is, the reason why Tanakh is using this device is to make it clear that this is a Davidic covenant. It's a fulfillment of what the prophets said, that out of David will come forth a house that cannot be destroyed, that cannot be undone, and that God would rescue the Davidic dynasty regardless of the vicissitudes it would face. So, for instance, the Davidic dynasty nearly was destroyed by Syria and the northern kingdom, famously in Isaiah 7 and 8. God delivered Achaz, who was very wicked at that time. The Assyrian Empire would seek to destroy the Chizkiyahu, his son, a very righteous king, very famous in Isaiah 36, 37, Isaiah chapter 9, 2 Kings chapter 18 and 19, 2 Chronicles 32. God would deliver Chizkiyahu, the Davidic dynasty, and destroy the Assyrian army in a startling event. In every case, Hashem intervenes to ensure that the Davidic dynasty would be preserved. Here is the problem. The Christian Bible, all over the place, is referring to is making use of the literature found in Ezekiel 34, very famous, that God is the good shepherd, which means that he will tend the flock. Why is flock, sheep, a roa, a shepherd used there? Because a sheep is an animal that really has no defenses. Unlike a deer that can run like the wind, it could defend itself. It's a prey animal, but it can run very, very fast, and it has defenses. Sheep has no defense. The only way a sheep could survive is through a shepherd. That's what's key. The text here is not telling us about zoology, none of these things. But a sheep is completely vulnerable, and without a shepherd, it can't survive. Moreover, certain type of sheep require a certain type of food. Younger sheep require a certain type of grass than older sheep, and the proper shepherd knows what sheep require what kind of food for their sustenance. And a good shepherd is one that's able to protect the sheep from all the dangers that face it, because they can't run, they have no physical defenses. The promise in Ezekiel 34 makes it clear that Jesus was not the Messiah. That means when Christians claim that here Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, very famously in John chapter 10, that proves he is not the Messiah. Why? Because what does it mean to be the good shepherd? It sounds nice, but the Navi makes it very clear that the good shepherd will ensure that no longer will the nations plunder the children of Israel, that there will be peace, that there will be a worldwide knowledge of the true God. When the true Mashiach comes, just read the end of Ezekiel 34. It's an epic chapter. You could really read the whole chapter, but if you just go all the way down the chapter to verse 31, you're going to see that God is ultimately the good shepherd. God excoriates the false leaders who have drawn the Jewish people astray, who have not properly protected the sheep, and that God is the shepherd, and God is going to use David, meaning the Mashiach, who will ultimately ensure that the prey and the predator will lie together, and they will live in the wilderness and in the forest safely. That's the key, verse 25. That should echo for you Isaiah chapter 11, which describes, it's a messianic chapter written 200 years before Ezekiel, where a moving portrait of the messianic age comes into view, and there we see predator and prey lying side by side, no one to be afraid, no fear. See Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 12 through 16, and there again you see how HaKadosh Baruch Hu will ensure that the faithful remnant of Israel will be completely protected. And that's exactly what didn't happen in the Christian century. So it is true that the shepherd, who is Mashiach, who is working on behalf of God, who is a messenger of God, who is the great shepherd, it is true that that's Mashiach. But that doesn't help Christianity. That passage alone in Ezekiel 34 demonstrates that Christianity is a false religion, that Jesus can't be the Messiah, because the exact opposite occurred. He failed at that task, because during the first century, the Jewish people were not protected from predators. On the contrary, the temple was destroyed. The Jewish people was slaughtered during the first century. They were dispersed rather than gathered in during the first century. If you wanted to know what is the antithesis, the very opposite of what's supposed to happen when the Messiah comes, look at the Christian century. So although people read John chapter 10, they don't go back to the original text in Ezekiel and go, okay, let me see what this means. What is the claim here? This is a massive claim. You are saying that I am the Messiah. I am the one that God has sent to protect the children of Israel and to ensure that nations live side by side and war will end. And they will graze peacefully. The very opposite occurred. If I needed to prove that Christianity is a false religion, there is no better chapter to illustrate that than Ezekiel chapter 34. It's almost mocking to have Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. I don't really think Jesus said those words. I can't know. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. It seems unlikely that Jesus is walking around saying, I am the good shepherd, which means I'm the Messiah. And somehow, we don't have that in Mark. That means we don't have those words in Mark. It means saying I am the Messiah, we would expect. Now, although there are references in the book of Mark to the shepherds who failed, so Ezekiel 34 comes up in there, but nothing as blatant as John chapter 10. Moreover, in Mark, no one really knows through the first 8 chapters who Jesus is. It's if you read the first 8 chapters of the book of Mark, one of the things that is most striking is that Jesus' messiahship is a secret that no one is to know who he really is. No one's to know his real identity. And what seeps through the synoptic gospels is that really nobody knows who Jesus is, and no one knows that Jesus is the Messiah until the end, when in Matthew 16, who do you say that I am? And nobody knows, except for Peter, who we're told flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you. I don't want to get into that part. I want to stay focused on that if Jesus claimed to be the fulfillment of Ezekiel 34, meaning he claimed to be the Messiah, so this very same chapter, is an indictment of that claim because it didn't happen. In fact, the very opposite occurred. Moreover, the church that emerged from Jesus, the church that was spawned, became the instrument of oppression against the Jewish people. And don't say they weren't real Christians. No matter what denomination, whatever flavor of Christianity you want to point to, there is no people that were more warlike, no religion that expressed vilification of the Jews than the church. There was no religion that that murdered each other in the way that the Christians slaughtered each other. The longest, bloodiest religious war in human history, the bloodiest religious war in human history, was a war fought between people who were followers of Jesus. And they were very religious. The war lasted 30 years. It started in 1618 and it ended in 1648. It's called the 30-Year War for a reason. 8 million people killed, Christians killing each other, the Holy Roman Empire destroyed, Germany eviscerated. This is the Good Shepherd? I mean, these are nice words, but let's look at what did you do? What did you accomplish? You accomplished everything that is the antithesis of what the Messiah is supposed to do. So the church became the mouthpiece, became the very root, the shirish, the source, the makor for Jew hatred by all the church fathers and all the reformers. And they were all very devout believers in Jesus. They all were. Stop saying they weren't real Christians. They were. And to this day, in Houston Baptist, in Moody, in all their libraries, they're studying Luther and Calvin, and they're all vicious anti-Semites. And the church fathers, their works, their screeds appear in every single Christian library, and Augustine's works are studied in every Christian university in the world, no matter what denomination. So why are you still studying the words of this vicious anti-Semite? So this is all nonsense. Let's focus in now on Ezekiel chapter 37. So in Ezekiel 37, there is nothing about the Messiah resurrecting from the dead and the resurrection, the vision of a resurrection of a valley of bones that are bleached. There seems to be no hope. Imagine you see a valley of dried out bones with sun just scorching on them. You would have to conclude that these can't live. God asks the prophet, just this is how Ezekiel 37 opens, can these bones live? Ezekiel is very much a prophetic work there to tell us about why the temple was destroyed, but that the nation of Israel will be preserved. Ezekiel responds, strangely, only you know. He understood the meaning of the vision. That means, can the children of Israel be restored? Can the nation be brought back after such a shattering experience of having their temple destroyed, of Babylon destroying? Ezekiel lived during the Babylonian Empire. The key is that the Ezekiel 37 tells us, and I encourage you to go to verse 11, 12, 13, and 14, precisely what the resurrection of the valley of dry bones means. People get this confused. It does not mean that the Messiah will be resurrected or that David will be resurrected. That's not in the text at all. These bones, Ezekiel 37 verse 11, are the whole house of Israel. In fact, the Jews say that our bones are dried up and our hope is completely lost. There is no hope. We have been cut off. God wants the children of Israel to know that there will be a full restoration in full measure where the nation will be restored. And tell them, I will open your graves in the following passage, and then you will know that I am Lord. Ezekiel 37 verse 13. To further convey that message, Ezekiel's instructed to take 2 rods, 2 pieces of wood. On one of them, write Judah and his companions, the other Ephraim and his companions, representing the southern kingdom of Judah, the northern kingdom of Israel. Northern kingdom of Israel, by this point, in Ezekiel, had been carried away to places far and unknown by the Assyrian Empire centuries earlier. Take the 2 sticks, place them in your hand, and behold, they will become as one, a restoration of the full kingdom of all of the Jewish people. So the resurrection that we see in the Valley of Dry Bones in Ezekiel 37 is not about the Messiah resurrecting, but rather it's about it's a picture of the restoration of the nation of Israel in the Messianic age. Again, that's exactly what did not happen in the first century. The very opposite occurred. The nation was exiled from the land of Israel and spread throughout the Roman Empire. Many lost their lives. If you want to know what the Messiah is supposed to do, just look at the first Christian century and just write out what occurred during the first century, and it's the very opposite. The first century is the reciprocal of what the Messiah is supposed to do. It's the very opposite of what it's supposed to do. Okay, so just make that very clear. And the Messiah is called David because in every generation there is someone who's ready to step forward as the Messiah, if the nation would deserve it, based on Isaiah chapter 59, verse 20 and 21. So that's why he's called David. There are some views that David will somehow be resurrected, but those are outlier views. It's not Kabbalistic. The basic meaning of the text, and I believe, and no doubt the correct view is that the Messiah is called David, as you mentioned, Hosea chapter 3, verse 5, specifically to convey that he is the fulfillment of the Davidic dynasty. John chapter 10 only mocks Christianity because Jesus fulfilled none of the promises we find in Ezekiel 34 and 37. And in fact, we see at the end of Ezekiel, it's all messianic. The most copious, the most detailed notes of the messianic age are found at the end of Ezekiel. None of the events described there in any way resemble what actually occurred to Jesus. But it's understandable why New Testament authors would use the term shepherd or good shepherd to describe Jesus, or to describe others, would use Ezekiel 34 as a palette to paint from, to create a picture of what Jesus was. The problem is that Christians learn from the Gospels. They don't actually go back to Ezekiel 34 and read the original text, and as such, they remain in the church. Let us hope that Christians will study the original text, Ezekiel 34, from beginning to end. It's an easy chapter, small chapter, and return back to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which will trigger the coming of the true Messiah quickly in our time. Thank you.
I mean, that's awesome. Very cool. once the question gets dropped in, I'm thinking, yeah, this will be a short one. But no, of course, you've got tons of stuff on this stuff. That's why we love your show, Rabbi. When we first started, you remember we used to do 2 hours, and I was worried that people would be short-minded. More people complained that you couldn't go 3 or 4 hours. Gotta love it. Okay, so we'll take the next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hi, it's Steve from Brooklyn. Sorry, we had those disconnection problems.
Hey, no worries.
Very strange. The whole story of the Phoenician woman, Mark 7:24-30. Is this like another one of the goof-ups of the people that wrote the Christian Bible, that they're trying to make Jesus look bad? Like, if anything, Jesus is acting like the Pharisees that he hates so much. He's acting like snobby, like, I'm not going to take care of your kid. Let your kid be vexed by the devil. I could care less. And she has to, like, beg him and say, hey, even the dogs eat the crumbs off the master's table. Like what's going on over here? So if we use the criterion of embarrassment, maybe the story actually came about because it was so embarrassing. Or is this like them trying to be anti-Semitic, and they'll throw Jesus under the bus anyway because we'll do whatever we got to do to make people hate Jews? So this is really confusing. I don't know what they were thinking, if they were thinking, and that's my question. Is that clear?
What was that? What chapter and verse? Mark what?
Mark 7:24-30. That's the whole story of the Phoenician woman. I'm reading it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Jesus looks so bad. He looks so banal. He looks like he could care less. He's so the opposite of who he's supposed to be.
Okay.
So is this something that actually happened? Or did somebody screw up and messed it up? And oh shoot, I should have cut that out of the story.
Okay.
I don't know. This is like very weird.
Very good. Okay. Thanks, Stephen. Go ahead and hang up now. Tune in. See you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Awesome. All right, guys. Make sure when you call in, don't hang up right away, because sometimes you might take about 20, 30 minutes to get through. So don't hang up. Rabbi?
Yeah, this is a very good question. So this story, what her identity is, a Phoenician woman, whatever, is varies a little bit. And we find in Matthew as well. We find it in Matthew and in Mark chapter 7, Matthew 15, where the key is that a Gentile woman comes to Jesus and says, my daughter needs help. I'm paraphrasing her, that she is vexed with the devil. She's possessed by demons. And Jesus refuses to help her. She's not Jewish. She then runs to the disciples. The story even looks worse than you presented it. She then runs to the disciples and hoping that they would interfere, that they would, put in a good word to get a healing for her daughter. They not only don't help her, but they run back to Jesus and say to him, this woman is, bugging us, So they are of no help to her at all. The Gentile woman then goes back to Jesus and essentially pleads with him, heal my daughter, she's vexed with the devil. And Jesus responds that it is not right to take the children's bread and give it to dogs, meaning that Gentiles are dogs. And the key is that they are not the heir to the blessings, which is only belongs to the Jews. She then responds, yes, but she acknowledges that she's a dog. And she says, yes, but even dogs eat from the crumbs that fall from the master's table. And Jesus then replies that you have answered well. That means you get it. It means you acknowledge that you're not the direct heir to the blessing, but you can, the way a dog waits at the side of the table for crumbs to fall down, you too can receive it. And then Jesus heals the daughter. So it's a very nasty story, but it's not criteria of embarrassment. The story is meant to convey that prior to the cross, that Jesus came only for the Jews and not for the Gentiles. Matthew chapter 10. Jesus is instructing his disciples, go not into the way of the Gentiles, in the city of the Samaritans enter ye not, only go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So what is being conveyed is initially Jesus only came for the Jews, but they received him not. He came to his own, but they received him not. What then the theology that's being conveyed here is that on the other side of the cross, you have the Great Commission of Matthew 28. And in that Great Commission, it's really how the book of Matthew ends, is go into all nations. The idea that the paroches, the veil that of separation in the temple, tore apart at some point during Jesus' crucifixion. The Gospels disagree on when this happened, but it's not important. Paul will actually use this as well as a device to convey that the veil between Jew and Gentile has been rent asunder. It has been taken away, and now there is a new humanity, as you would find in the opening of Colossians. That new humanity is not the humanity that is based on Moses and the law and the children of Israel, but it's not the one that is conveyed through the sin of Adam, but it's a new humanity in the resurrected Christ. That's the key of all this. The key is this all fits together in that way. A new humanity that is universal in the body of Christ. There is no Jew nor Gentile, man, woman, slave, free man. All are one in the body of Christ, Galatians 3:28. So you can find incredible differences between Matthew and the letters of Paul, but this is a big issue that comes up. So the story is not meant to be embarrassing. It just it does not fulfill the criteria of embarrassment. It's there to show that initially the blessing was only for the Jews. The Messiah only was for the Jews. The story is very weird. Like, why wouldn't Jesus help her? And why does a Gentile need to be a dog in order for her to get it right? And strangely, Jews are often charged with looking at Gentiles as second-class citizens, and the reason where do they get that view from? Where do Christians get the view that Jews look down upon them? Strangely, it comes from Christianity. It comes from these sort of texts. That's the view of the Jews. Not only this, but what you find in Acts, where Peter won't sit and won't eat with Gentiles. Like, there's some idea that we can't sit at the same table with people who are not Jewish. So they think, oh, that must be the attitude of the Jews. Well, we had nothing to do with this. Look, Christians are not crazy. They're not genetically deformed. They are simply inhaling this toxic literature, and that alone is forming their view of the Jews and how the Jews view them. So they view the Jews as seeing the Gentiles in the way that the Gospels portray Judaism viewing the Gentiles, as dogs, as second-class citizens. It's not that Germans, that Lutherans and Roman Catholics and Pius XII were genetically evil. If Pius XII had been born to a Buddhist family in Thailand, he would have never committed the crimes that he did. If the Germans or those in the Slavs who committed unspeakable crimes against the Jews, slaughtering them, murdering them, and in the Einsatzgruppen, if they had been raised in Hindu families, they would have never committed these atrocities. If Streicher had been raised in a Buddhist family without ever been exposed to this type of toxic literature, he would have never been the editor of Der Stürmer. All this literature very masterfully shapes a caricature in the mind of the Christian of the Jew and the Jewish view of the non-Jew. And therefore they think we hate them. And Jews go, well, we don't hate you. Like, why are you so weird? And it's because Jews are not reading Mark 7. So the Gospels very well shape the view for Christians of how Jews view non-Jews. And that's what's happening here. But there's also a dispensational salvific economy that's being conveyed here as well. And that's the bigger picture. And that is before the cross and after the cross. Prior to the cross, the salvation, the dispensation, which means the salvific economy, was for the Jew only. After the cross, after the veil has been torn in the temple, the separation between the chosen and the unchosen, that completely collapsed. Paul will misquote Hosea. He's going to do that up and down in Romans. Those who are not my people are my people. It's a nightmare. It's a complete misquote of Hosea chapter 2. So this is not a criteria of embarrassment, but this is a very useful device to demonstrate that he came to his own, but they received him not. Jesus was ready to bring the salvation program to the Jews alone and not to the Gentiles. This woman, the Phoenician woman, is blessed by Jesus only because she recognized her status prior to the cross as a dog, as a second-class citizen spiritually, and then he healed the daughter. But it is the intent is before the cross and after the cross. Same thing in Mark. Who is the one at the end of Mark, which sums this all up? Who is the one at the cross who says, "Behold, this is truly the Son of God"? A Jew? No. It's a Roman centurion. That's the key of how Mark's 16 ends. It's who's a Roman centurion? What does that mean? That's like the highest level of, it's not even to call him a soldier, it's like a general. He represents Rome. He represents the Gentiles. And the centurion was able to recognize what the Jews were completely blind to. So look at the contrast. The Jews are always blind in the New Testament, despite that the revelation came to them, despite that the blessings came to them. But it took a high-level Roman citizen, the Gentile, he is the one that gets it. Whether it's the Phoenician woman, the Canaanite woman, depending on which book you use, or whether it's the Roman leader. The Gentiles get it and the Jews don't. Pontius Pilate and his wife get it, Matthew 27, and the hordes of Jews don't get it. The Magi from the east get it and worship the little baby in the infancy narrative of Matthew, but Herod wants to kill the baby. You understand what's going on there? So you have to see the larger picture. You can't read Mark 7 alone out of context. You have to read the whole picture of Mark. It's not a very big book, only 678 passages. It's an hour and a half read, and you'll get the whole picture. Thank you for your question, Steve.
Very good. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from. Oh, sorry. Volume was down. Try it again. Caller, you're live on the air.
Hello?
Yes, you're live.
Oh, okay. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My question is, this is Elliot from the Bronx.
Oh, welcome, Elliot.
Okay. My question is about Peter, or as the Messianic missionaries call him, Peter the Zadik, or Cephas, and Paul. The last couple of months I've been seeing postings by Messianic missionaries from rabbis that claim that Peter was the first Jewish pope, and he wrote two prayers that we recite today. One is the Nishmat, and the other one I can't remember. My question is, why was it hidden from the church, and why don't the Christians recite these two prayers? And I'd like to know more, about this story. They're claiming that Peter actually held on to his Jewish identity, and to keep peace, he became the Pope of Rome, the first Jewish Pope of Rome. So that's my question.
Rabbi, are you clear?
Yeah.
Okay, Elliot, go ahead and hang up now. You can tune in for your answer, okay?
Thanks.
Thank you. You bet.
Hey, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, Rabbi, go ahead.
All right, so let's unpack all of that. Well, first of all, nowhere in Jewish literature does it say that Jesus was the first pope. So, what happens is like at birthday parties when little kids play the game telephone, by the time you get to the end, things get jumbled. Let's unpack that. It's a Catholic tradition that Peter was the first pope, and his primacy in the view of the church, of the Latin church, is founded on Matthew 16. Now let's go back. So there is a very strong legend. It's a strong legend. I could tell you that there are sources for it. But it's a legend that's even much more intriguing than this. But this is clearly the source for what you've just shared with me. There is a legend that Shimon, who's Peter, was a completely religious Jew. And there was a problem during the first century, and that is there wasn't really a church yet. So the Jews who had become Christians, we're going to use that word become Christians, not that that term is used in the Christian Bible. It means Christians don't identify as Christians in the New Testament. The term Christian is used in the New Testament only by non-Christians 3 times, but we're just going to use that to have convenient language, conventional language. The problem was that the Jews who had become Christians during this very early stage were still in the synagogue, and they were poisoning. They were toxic to the Jewish community. This is a legend. It is recorded in some commentaries. It is. I've seen it for myself. It's brought down in a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. It's brought down in a few places. There are sources for this. And the problem was that you had people who were guising themselves as religious Jews who were completely in the Jewish community, and they were spreading the teachings of the early church in the synagogue. And this was very dangerous. We just had a case here in Israel where a Christian was pretending to be a Hasidic rabbi, and he infiltrated the community, and it's a nightmare, and we're still sorting it all up. It's a very serious problem. So imagine that all you have is these early Jewish Christians. You can call them Ebionites, Nazarenes. These are not terms that we don't have their writings, but this is how their opponents refer to them. But we have early Christians who were fully identified as Jews, but they were in the synagogue, and this was like a cancer among the Jewish people, and somehow they had to be extracted from the synagogue. They had to be removed. Who could possibly do this? Now, I don't know if this story is true or not. I don't know, but I'll tell you how this is how the story goes, just so you know. So this person was asked, would he infiltrate the church, become a leader in the church, and remove these Christians, these Jewish Christians from the synagogue, so that they would no longer pose a threat to the integrity of the Jewish people. This guy, Simon, was willing to do this with the promise that he would have a place in the world to come, even if he did something so extraordinary, and have to put himself in that very odd position that would ordinarily threaten his eternity. He was promised eternal life, and then he went on that venture. That's the legend. And that he is the author of a prayer that is said during the Musaf service on Shabbat, which you spoke of. That's the legend. There are some people who go, this is complete nonsense, but there is such a legend. Even goes further that if you go to, in the Shulchan Aruch, means the Code of Jewish Law, and you go to the section that's devoted to fast days that where we don't eat. So there are minor fast days, which most people do not keep, but some people do. And there's actually a fast day assigned to the real day of his death. the text doesn't mention Peter, but in a commentary on it, the text only says, for some person I don't know who died. But there's a commentary that says that that's Peter. That's how odd this really becomes. So there it is. That's a legend. And what makes sense about this legend? I'm just going to give you my thoughts, because I don't. But one of the things that's very striking about Peter in Christian literature is his primacy, is his importance, is the fact that he's front and center. But Peter is also, in a sense, the schlemazel in the Christian Bible. He's the one that's making mistakes all over the place. Peter is a very complicated character in the Christian canon, because he's not portrayed as this person who's always doing the right thing, in contrast to Paul. Once Paul converts to Christianity, he is characterized in the book of Acts as being infallible. Paul never makes a mistake after his conversion. In contrast, Peter is just blundering one place after another over and over again. He's a very complex personality in the Christian Bible. And there we have the criteria of embarrassment starting to lurk its head. That means, why would the Christian canon portray such an important disciple as one who's messing up all the time? When Jesus is saying that he's going to be given over to the authorities and he's going to have to suffer many things and die, Peter says, "Far be it from you, Lord, that shall not happen to you." And Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." I mean, Peter is so wrong about that. And it's in the Christian canon. Now, you should be asking the question, if you're a Christian, why would Peter say such a thing? If Isaiah 53 in the first century was understood to be referring to the Messiah, Peter should be going, of course you're going to have to suffer many things and die. It says so in Isaiah 53. That demonstrates clearly that nobody thought of that. But setting that aside, I don't want to go off on another topic, but you need to know that. Like, why would Peter respond, "Far be it from you, Lord, that you're going to have to suffer," if Isaiah 53 openly, and not only Isaiah 53, but Psalm 22 and all these chapters, all we are told says the Messiah has to be cut off, Daniel 9, then why is he going "far be it from you"? Because they didn't think that way. But staying focused, Peter is the person who's described as the person who's the schlemazel is a Yiddish term, which means someone who's blundering and falling and just messing up all the time. He is the mess of a person. Peter is the one that denies Christ after the crucifixion. And he's not doing it once. There's a contradiction, I don't think really important, between the Gospels of exactly how many times he does it and how many times the cock has to crow, and I don't care about that. But the point is that he's denying Christ during the Passion narrative. So the Gospels want to portray Peter as someone who just is not getting it. So that's very interesting. Like, why? Why is there this tension in the Gospels? Why Peter, in some sense, is given us a position of primacy. You are the rock upon which the church will be built. That hence the name Peter. Why is he given that primacy, that importance, that presence in very critical times? But he is portrayed as someone who doesn't know, who's a hypocrite by Paul in Galatians chapter 2. And Paul tells him to his face that you're wrong and you're a hypocrite and you're playing games with how you behave. The context is that Peter, Paul claims, is behaving one way when he's around Jews from the Jerusalem church versus among Gentiles. So around fellow Jewish Christians, he's behaving like a Jew. And then among Gentiles, he's behaving in other ways, a complete hypocrite. It's in the text. It happened in Antioch. I ain't making it up. Why does Peter get that Why does Peter not get it that you can eat food that's unclean? He doesn't get it. It has to have the vision of unclean animals falling from heaven and a voice saying, you can eat them. And Peter's going, oh, no, these are unclean. And, and the heavenly voice is correcting Peter again, who just is not getting it. Okay. So this is not one event. What is coming very clear is that you find this in the major works of the Christian Bible, that Peter just is all over the place. I don't believe for a moment that the epistles attributed to Peter were authored by Peter. It would be very clear from the book of Acts that Peter would have been illiterate, as would be others in Acts 4:13. I don't believe that was written by Peter. I believe that was written. Well, we don't know who. I can't tell you who wrote it. But whoever wrote, let's say, 2 Peter, just trying to show that everybody's on the same page. Specifically, 2 Peter 3:15, 3:16. So the key is that we find an anomaly, and one of the things I've shown you in the past is when we want a discovery, you're looking like at an MRI or an X-ray, and you're going, what doesn't fit here? What stands out? And one of the things that stand out is that Peter is getting it wrong in too many places. And that's just not the way apostles are typically portrayed. Certainly not someone as important as Peter. Surely you can have a passage in the book of John about Thomas, but the book of John there wants to show that Jesus' crucifixion was a physical crucifixion. So there's a plot device, there's a story of the doubting Thomas at the end of the book of John in order to push back against that. You won't find that in the Synoptics. So that anomaly, that glaring anomaly in the Christian canon seems to point that there's something odd about Peter, and might point to this legend that Peter really was complicated and that he really wasn't a Christian, but he was sent in to push the Christian community outside of the synagogue, a 19th benediction for the famous prayer, the Shemona Esrei, which literally means the 18, a 19th Zeta during that same time, against the minim. A min would be is an acronym. So min typically is translated as someone who's an unbeliever, but it really means a Christian, because it's an acronym. Almost certainly means a Christian, because it's an acronym for Mamine Yeshua Notzrim. Mamine Yeshua Notzer, who's a Notzrim, who are believers in Jesus, the Nazarene. So that's the legend. Is it true? I don't know. It's a legend. There are some people who are so offended by this legend. There's some rabbis who think this legend is so preposterous that they make that known. But it's a legend. Is it true? I can't prove it. Thank you for your question.
All right. Sorry about that. All right, let's see. Can you hear me now? Check 1 2. Oh, I can't hear myself. I don't know why.
You're all good.
Okay, hang on a second. I can't hear myself. Let me see if this fixes it. Oh yeah, that's better now. Okay, good deal. Remember I told you earlier that all the volume and stuff is spiking really hot? I think I found out what was causing it, but it just caused another problem, so I'm going to have to wait till after the show to try to play around with it, which was obviously the wise choice anyway.
How many years are we doing this?
I don't know, but hopefully we can do it for many more years to come. Don't fire me, Rabbi. Don't fire me.
I won't. Okay.
Okay, good deal. We'll take this next caller. Caller, you are live on the air. Tell us your name, where you're calling from, please.
This is Todd from Cleveland. Rabbi Singer, I'm curious to hear what you think about something called the Orthodox Rabbinic Statement on Christianity. It was adopted in December of 2015. This is Rabbi Shlomo Riskin's group, if you're familiar with that. They adopted the statements of a number of the European rabbis. I could list a whole bunch of names: Samson Rachel Hirsch, Jacob Emden, among others.
One of the things you want to do is, if you can not name names, that would make it much easier for me to comment. The moment you start naming names, and I just say this to all the viewers, it inhibits my ability to respond, because then it gets personal, and I never bring up names. So I can more freely respond to it if no names come up.
And I can appreciate that. Gist, I guess, of what they say is Christianity is okay for Gentiles, but not for Jews. It's a different position than Maimonides. So I was wondering if you could comment about that.
Are we clear, Rabbi?
So that's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for calling in. Go ahead and hang up now and tune in for the answer, okay?
Thank you.
You bet. All right, very good. Go ahead, Rabbi.
So that's really an unfortunate statement, because you would have to believe that God is happy with his creations, who are created in his image, worshiping a man. You would have to believe that. And we know from the Bible that's not true. We know from Scripture that Abraham, who was the father of the Jewish people, was not a Jew, who was a Mesopotamian, whose father was an idol worshiper, rejected all of it, all idolatry, and turned to the one God of Abraham. That's how we know him today. I understand why rabbis would say that, and that's because they want to have an ecumenical relationship with Christians. That's the only possible reason why someone would express something like that. We all want to get along. So you will have people saying, oh, we all worship the same God. Because we're living in a time when people are not getting along, they want to get along. So people will say things that blur the truth. Now, it's true that if someone is a Unitarian Christian, so that person really does worship one God. It's not a perfect worship, but it's not idolatry. But to say that about Trinitarian Christians is not correct, and it is toxic for every single person. And we should never engage in this low expectation for non-Jews when they could be raised up. And if you dare not lead the nations properly, the nations are going to come to you. And I say that to all Jewish leaders, and I'm going to ask you, why were you silent? Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you explain this to us? Why didn't you wake us up? Why didn't you remind us that Trinitarian belief is an abomination? We really would have rather known that. You don't have to be obnoxious when you speak to a Christian, but to convey to non-Jews that it's good and okay for them to worship a man as God, that's a good thing, is nonsense. It's not based on any Jewish law. Now, I'm going to explain to you where it comes from in a moment. But people should stop doing that. You're not helping Christians. And thank God I'm able to have a voice to speak out about this topic. It's very important for people to understand that this is not Mark chapter 7, where somehow non-Jews are dogs, and, oh yeah, you can have some polluted view of the nature of God and the Godhead. It's okay for you because you're just a Gentile. That's not okay. And what is okay is the true knowledge of God, and that all the nations will speak in a pure speech. Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 9. I mean, that's the whole messianic hope, is that all the nations will worship the true God, because the knowledge of God will cover the world as the water covers the sea. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 9. the point is, in these passages, it's that the non-Jews were wrong, and they're going to finally get it at the end of days. The whole messianic hope is umbilically connected to a true following of God by whom? By the nations of the world, the Goyim. That's the whole point. The whole point is that in Jeremiah 16, verse 19 and 20, the non-Jews, the Goyim, the word Gentile is really a Latin word. I'm using because it's convenient, but we didn't come up with that word. But the nations will come to you, the Jews, and say, we've inherited lies and vanity where there's no truth. How can a man make unto himself gods when they're not? It is the worst thing in the world for a non-Jew to believe in anything but the one true God and not worship nothing else, adore nothing else, pray to no one else but the true God. And we don't all worship the same God. So I do understand why there would be a feeling that we need to be ecumenical and we all get along. We all really these are different pathways to the true God. These are not different pathways to the true God. Trinitarian belief is idolatry. In fact, it's the worst iteration of idolatry. The prohibition against a partnership precedes and is more important than the prohibition against worshiping idols. Exodus chapter 20, just see the first 3 verses, precedes, trumps the prohibition that you should not worship any graven image, anything that flies in the heaven above or on the earth below, and precedes that, because a partnership has to be worse. The type of idolatry that Christians engage in has to be worse because Christians worship the true God the Father. Christians all believe that the Father is God. All of them believe that. In addition to that, they venerate and worship his Son, they believe, as God as well, who's part of a 3-part Godhead. A homostasis, an idea that is a Christian invention. Its antecedents are found in the Christian Bible, but it really is born later in the writings of Ignatius, in what is articulated by Tertullian and others in the 2nd century, where he invents the word Trinity. He was a church father from Carthage, on the African continent, and would develop until it would be hammered out as an orthodoxy at the Council of Nicaea. But it was an idea that was long predated the Council of Nicaea in 325. It is the worst thing for a person to believe that in the true God, and in addition, there's something else that's worthy of worship. It's the worst thing in the world. And I'm sorry that anyone would teach that. And strangely, it's taught to people who are really told to people who are really nice people, who really would be very receptive to hearing why Jesus is not God. Because if he isn't God and you worship him as God, even Christians will concede that the doctrine of the Trinity is idolatry. Every Christian will tell you that if Jesus is not God and you worship him as God, it is an act of idolatry. They will reluctantly concede that point. So it is a mistake to say that. I understand why they're saying it. Like we all believe the same thing, and the idea is to have. But it's a huge mistake. You're not doing them favors. It is much better to say that cigarette smoking will kill you. Not in one way, but in many ways. In every bad way you can imagine, cigarette smoking will kill you. Not immediately, not the first puff. It's not like blowing your brains out with a 44 Magnum. It's a long prolonged death that leads to heart attack, stroke, cancer, and everything, every horrible thing. And the best thing is to tell people don't smoke. It's bad for you. Now, you're probably asking the question, well, where does this even come from? Like, why would it, like, so I'm going to explain to you, and here we're going to get very technical in Jewish law to explain how could someone even, why do I hear this around? That it's okay for the non-Jew. I'm the one who cares about the non-Jew because I'm speaking for them. I'm saying, come home, put away that filth. But I might as well explain the whole deal. So, like, how did that become that? How did anyone get it wrong? All right, so there is a disagreement, not if the Trinity is idolatry. There's no disagreement on that. But there is a view that's an outlier, but I'll explain it to you. And it's on a real technicality of Jewish law. It's not, there is no disagreement. No, there is no position that doctrine of the Trinity is idolatry. No one holds that position. 0 people. You know, what's going on? Like, how did that thing start? So there is, in Jewish law, it is forbidden for a Jew to engage in commerce with an idol worshiper immediately prior to his holiday. As an example. Why? The Jew is not allowed to do anything that would promote idolatry. He can't do something that makes it easier for an idol worshiper to engage in his idol worship. It's forbidden. Before the blind, you may not put a stumbling block. The Jew cannot behave in a way that will lead to non-Jews sinning. Cannot. Another example. A Jew in Jewish law cannot take as a business partner someone who engages in idolatry. Cannot do it. Now, you might think that's a boycott. It isn't. The reason for that is different than you would anticipate. The concern is that if you take a business partner, long-term business partner, who worships idols, eventually you're going to have a falling out. You're going to have a disagreement over, and your idol-worshipping friend, partner, will then swear in the name of his God that what he is saying is true as a result of your financial partnership. And therefore, you can't have a business partner who worships idols, because it will ultimately lead to that person worshiping idols. Your very partnership will trigger the non-Jew to worship idols, to swear in the name of his idol. And that's an absolutely forbidden practice under the 7 Noahide laws. You understand that? Okay. Therefore, according to this position, which is the consensus, as you mentioned, Maimonides, War of Jews, and so on. Therefore, a Jew could not take a business partner who's a Christian, who's a religious Christian. Why? Maimonides would tell you very clearly, because one day you're going to have a falling out, and the guy's going to say, I swear in the name of Jesus, and that's an act of idolatry. It's an absolute forbidden act for a Ben Noach. You understand? Now, there is a view that is essentially the view of the Meiri. The Meiri was a French rabbi, medieval period, early. And he had a very unique view, and his view is not that the Trinity is not idolatry, But because the direct prohibition against a shutfus, which means a partnership, is expressed in the Ten Commandments, and the non-Jews were never warned about that iteration of idolatry. After all, they were not at Mount Sinai. Therefore, you can have a partnership with them. The reason is not that it's good for a Gentile, but you then don't have to make multiple assumptions. Whenever you have a question upon a question in Jewish law, whenever you have things, what happens if that happens? But even if that happens, something else might happen, and then something else might happen. So the moment you have what's called a sveka, a question within a question, so then it is no longer illicit. This is very important. So if having a partnership with a non-Jew can cause, an idol worshiper can trigger an idolatrous act in the non-Jew, so then it's a suffix, which means a question, diaraisa from the Torah, and therefore it's forbidden. But what happens if you have a question of whether even non-Jews were ever commanded about shutfus, about partnership? So according to the view of the Meiri, this is Christianity. And therefore, we don't have to be cautious about this. We don't have to make that leap. That's the real source of that. It's going to be repeated over by the Ramah. But that's where this really comes from. So we can say this is a disagreement between Maimonides and the Meiri, two people who lived during roughly the same epoch. The consensus view is the Rambam, but strange way, the practice is that Jews do take partners who are Christians. And I think this is really problematic. But I don't want to deal with that because I want to deal with what you said. To say that it is okay for a non-Jew to worship to believe in the doctrine of the Trinity, that is an inaccurate portrayal of where this comes. It is not okay. This whole issue is on an area of Jewish law about Jewish people doing business with Christians on their holy days, prior to the holy days, and so on. Therefore, being an enabler, or having the sort of relationship with Christians where our very business partnership would directly trigger them to worship idols, and therefore it will be forbidden. So that's what this is about. I know this sounds very picayune, but I just want to illustrate to you how something can go from that small little area. Is there a heter? Is there a way out? That's really the question. Is there an escape hatch so that a Jew can have a business partner with a Christian? Is there any way to escape the prohibition? According to the Meiri, there is an escape hatch so that sort of relationship could be possible. According to Maimonides and literally everybody else, there is no escape hatch. It is not saying that we all worship and saying, oh, that's ridiculous, but that's what happened. And people do not go back to the sources. And as a result of that, people get themselves in an enormous amount of trouble. And there's your answer. I'm very careful in my broadcast not to attack anybody personally I never do that. Missionaries do it all the time. I don't. So when you call one a question, if you just leave people's names out, it makes it easier for me because I don't want to. I know all these people, and I don't want to. Their intent. I haven't had this conversation with them, but whatever. There you go.
Very good. Very good. Rabbi, you got time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay. Very good. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from. Caller, you're live on the air.
Hello?
Yes, welcome to the show. You're live on the air.
I was a Christian for 68 years, and
Wow.
hearing your program and with William and the rabbi, I just want to thank you very much, and I became a Noahide. My question
Welcome.
is, hello?
You go ahead. We're all ears.
Go ahead.
Yes, my question is in the book of Daniel, he lists he lists Babylon, and he lists Persia, and he lists Greece and Rome. Why wasn't Assyria listed among those countries?
Okay. Rabbi, clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for calling in. Go ahead and hang up now. You can tune in for the answer, okay? Very good. All right, Rabbi, go ahead. All right, callers, this is going to be the last topic for the day. So, Rabbi, take it away.
Right. So the question could be expanded. I mean, you don't have to only, stop at first the question. That means Daniel lived during the Babylonian Empire and the Persian Empire, very beginning of it, and he envisions the Greek Empire and the Edom. So he's essentially standing in a spot in history, and he is going to convey through information given to him by the angel Gabriel. There's no point in the book of Daniel that God is actually speaking directly to Daniel. He's receiving prophecy through the angel, as you find in the latter prophets. What the prophets have in view is an assurance to the future, not to the past. The Jewish people had been conquered many times and delivered many times, as we don't have to stop with Assyria, but the Assyrian Empire predated Daniel. Daniel is standing there shocked at what he's observing. As an example, in Daniel 9, verse 1 and 2, the emergence of the Medo-Persian Empire, and the nation is not returning back as he thought Jeremiah 29, verse 10 would point to. But Daniel is interested in conveying what the angel revealed to him at that stage in history. So Daniel is there to reassure the future generations about what they could expect. And he does that by conveying what the angel is conveying to him. The angel is not interested in recapturing the past. So the Assyrian Empire preceded the Babylonian Empire. That was a very big deal to Isaiah, but it was not important to Daniel. It was of no importance to him. The Egyptians also held the Jewish people for centuries, but at Daniel's stage in life, he lived during the Babylonian Empire. He was taken and groomed to be a viceroy in Egypt by Nebuchadnezzar. He was only 14 years old. He was a genius. He was a prodigy. He was a giant. So the angel Gabriel is there to solve for him and all generation that would follow of what is about to happen. And that unfolds very strikingly right at the outset of Daniel, where Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, has the dream of a figure who has a head of gold and chest of silver, and then legs of bronze and feet of clay and iron. So it's that stage going forward. Nebuchadnezzar is going to fail. He's going to ignore the message, build a image of gold that would follow. He's going to be told that he's going to be destroyed. Daniel's going to convey to him, there's a way out for you, Nebuchadnezzar, in chapter 4, verse 24, 27, in a Christian Bible, that you can give charity. Daniel is going to be bewildered at the Babylonian Empire's fall, with no return of the Jewish people, because he views Jeremiah 25 verse 12 and 29 verse 10, two passages in Jeremiah which appear to be identical at first glance. They both appear to be 70-year prophecies of redemption, so they appear to be the same. They're not. And this leads to a very important prophecy in Daniel 9, which the Christians will abuse completely. By the way, the secular world, the godless world, detests the book of Daniel and will do everything possible to advance the idea that Daniel is a forgery and ignore every method that is used to identify how do you know if a book of antiquity was really written during that time or later. And one of the most rigorous methods for knowing, is this book written during the time when this book is purported to have been written? Well, how do you know? How do you know if an ancient book was really written during that time or was written at a later time? How do people, how do you do that? What's the science? So, and the problem with any science relating to history is that it lacks the methods that are available to other types of the hard sciences that you can't replicate it. You can't replicate history. So what possible methodology is accessible to a historian to know when was Daniel written? Because the secular, godless, academic world hates the idea that Daniel was written 2,500 years ago. Why? Because they oppose God. They oppose the notion that God inspired the books of the Bible. And because there are prophecies in Daniel that someone during the Babylon Empire could not have known, such as Alexander the Great, the four kingdoms that would emerge after his early demise, and so on. So therefore, they have to assign it to a later period. It doesn't help them really, because we're told in Daniel 9 about the destruction of the temple. There's a million reasons on this. But one of the rigorous methods, I'm going to share this with you now, because during these shows, I want to fill you up with thinking and thought. One of the most rigorous methods to identify when a document was written and when the person really lived is, what are the concerns of the person in the document, the most important figure in the document? What is he worried about? Daniel is really worried about why the Jews are not returning after the fall of the Babylonian exile, the Babylonian Empire, and why the Jews are not returning, and why Jeremiah's prophecy of 29:10 does not appear to be being fulfilled. He is so worried about that, he starts crying to God in a long prayer, which people don't read. Why would someone who was writing 2,200 years ago be concerned about the fall of the Babylonian Empire and the Jews not returning, as he thought is prophesied by Jeremiah 29:10? I mean, that's so simple to understand when the book was written. I know I really went off course here, but I did it because I need to strengthen you. I need to infuse you with Torah. You need to know what's going on here. So, when you're reading Tanakh, you have to know when is a book written. It's really important. What were the surrounding events that were occurring during that time? And bear in mind as well that the Babylonian Empire really marks a time when prophecy is receding, coming to an end. In fact, the prophets that would follow from the Babylonian exile forward, meaning you have Daniel, you have Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, their prophecy is coming through angels now. So it's an epic. There's an earlier epic, the Assyrian Empire, but you had prophets. People are talking directly to God, not through an angel, who God is, more importantly, talking to God. God is speaking to them. But here we're starting an epic where people are now, it's sort of the station. You ever driving in a large city and you're listening to the radio, and then as you leave the city and driving to another town, you're driving from Dallas to Austin, and as you're leaving Dallas, the station starts to fizzle away, and then you can't get it anymore. Now when you're somewhere, I think it's Interstate 35 or whatever, or 45 or whatever it is. You could tell I've done that drive. So that's what happens. It's weakening. It's weakening. It doesn't just collapse. It's weakening. So it's a period where this is why the four are so together. It's a period where revelation is not coming directly from God, directly to a person, but it's coming already through angels. And because the transmission and the revelation has now been weakened considerably, there are the four kingdoms that become very, very important. And of course, you can't ignore the throwback to Genesis 13 and 14, where Abraham defeats the four kingdoms, rescuing his nephew Lot and taking no booty, and then is blessed by Melchizedek in Genesis chapter 14. That's why the number 4 is going to come up over and over again. But that's a really great question. Thank you.
Absolutely, and great show.
Welcome home.
Yes, indeed. Thank you all for tuning in. It's been a great show as usual. And for those again who are unaware, first of all, Rabbi Tovia Singer's books. The CDs on screen are no longer available, but the books are. You can get them at outreachjudaism.org. That's probably the best access point to get them through. And if you already have these and you have never listened to the audio files, which actually contain these CDs, you're really missing out. They go hand in hand with the books. It's not an audio book on CD. It's literally different information that match the topics of each chapter in both these books. If you haven't done this, outreachjudaism.org, click on the free audio tab at the top, and you also have an option there if you want to download all of them at one time, put a donation in of any amount, and you can download the entire set to whatever audio device, MP3 that you have. It's a great learning tool. So, but guys, we really appreciate y'all coming in, and Rabbi, once again, thank you, great show, and thank you all, and we will see you all next week, Hashem willing. So Shavu Tov, and we'll see you on the other side. Peace out, everybody. Thank you, Rabbi.